Hello, welcome to Scary Thoughts, Horror, Philosophy, Culture. I'm Marc Kate.
And I'm Chad Lott.
This is episode 61. We're going to be talking about Predator from 1987. And let's get you ready for our next episode. Episode 62, we will be talking about Child's Play, the reboot from 2019. Have you seen it yet?
No, we were going to do it before, and it was in and out of the theaters so fast that it was like, you blinked and it was gone.
But it's rentable now,
Yeah.
So stream it up, get back to the podcast. You can email us at whatthe@scarythoughts.org about Child's Play or anything else. Do you have anything to plug?
Negative.
Me neither. My life's been quiet. You can sign up for our newsletter at scarythoughts.org, which I fixed the link. Sorry to all of you who went to our page, scarythoughts.org, and tried to sign up for our newsletter and got various forms of rejection. It should work now. I've tested it. You've tested it.
Yep.
It works. And last thing before we just get straight to discussing Predator, spoilers ahead. We're not reviewing Predator. We are just going to be talking about it. This was your idea. Mm-hmm. I was very resistant. I had never seen Predator until a week ago. So did this movie hold something for you as a kid or anything like that?
I was probably 9 when this came out, and I definitely saw it in the theater, which is hilarious.
Wow.
And I love it. I love this movie. I love Predator 2. There are things I like about the other movies, even the Alien versus Predator crossovers. Most of those movies, I think, are basically unsuccessful. There's the one with Adrian Brody. I think it's called Predator Back in Action Again or whatever it is. It's okay, but I think the look of the creatures is very original, and we'll get into like the whole how it happened later. But everything about it, especially the comic books, the Alien versus Predator comic books, and they bring in like pieces of like the engineer mythos from Alien, and the way it's all tied together, I think is just really cool. And I own the Weyland-Yutani hat. I love this shit. I probably have had up until the last few years all of the comic books. I used to buy them when they came out and stuff. So I'm pretty invested in this, and I also love Arnold Schwarzennegger. I'm a huge fan of him. And we were talking about whether or not I would say this on the thing, but I don't vote. I don't give a fuck about voting at all. The one time I ever voted was for Arnold Schwarzenegger as governor.
Oh my God.
And I was so stoked to do it. So
that's funny. Okay. I have a lot to say about Arnold, but the one thing I will say about him politically is I read, it was like a long, long article in some magazine, or maybe it was like a New York Times magazine exclusive back when he was still in office. And I kind of read the article, and it was just about his governorship. And I remember one thing he said in it was expressing profound frustration that he had all these ambitions and excitement to take office and make a difference and make changes. But his discovery that the system is designed to not change anything, and that he only got resistance through every step. So he's kind of wondering what he did it all for. And that really stuck with me. I really didn't want him to affect change because I didn't like what he was about, but I really sort of sympathized with here's a guy who actually had some political ambitions and realized it was all pointless, even though he's like king of the mountain of California.
Yeah, I think if you were to retroactively look at his politics today, he's probably right where Obama was.
Right.
Totally.
He's
maybe even left of Obama a little bit because he was pro-gay marriage earlier.
Right.
And other than that, I don't really know his politics, but I remember that article, and I remember that exact same thing.
No shit.
I remember reading it at the time. I read it when it came out, and it has always stuck with me. And it's one of the things that makes me not too worried about Donald Trump in general, is I feel like the system is designed to get nothing done. It really is this dystopic hellscape of a legal system.
Right.
And, people get mired in it, and everybody does, the good and the evil. And it's interesting to see what he did after the governorship, man. He doubled down on all of his Special Olympics stuff. He's out there helping kids. The dude is really, really impressive. And I guess this will be a Predator Arnold Schwarzenegger love fest.
From one of us.
From one of us. I mean, he was rich before he was ever Mr. Universe. That's one of the things that some people are just so fucking wild and vibrant that they just win no matter what. And he's one of those dudes. And that I think his presence is what made me like this movie so much. I mean, other than that, it is a very like, it does everything 80s in one movie. I mean, it has everything. It has like grenade launching machine guns. And fun fact, the Arnold's machine gun is the same machine gun from Scarface. So it's literally like the same
prop?
gun. It's the same prop gun.
That's rad.
Yeah. So like, say hello to my little friends
Yeah.
and get them to the chopper or in the same universe, maybe. And that's another thing about
Who
this.
has that gun? Where is that gun right now?
So the gun, so there's a company that's like a prop gun company that just is, you know, they're probably still in business, and just one of the dudes just bought it because they had to modify it to shoot shotguns, so it could have the fire at the bottom of it instead of being an actual grenade launcher. It's interesting. A lot of these prop gun companies, they just make the guns actually function worse than they did. Like, for example, Jesse the Body Ventura's Vulcan machine gun, which is fucking awesome in this movie. And so original and weird. Like somebody said, you know what? That thing that's on a helicopter, let's have a big dude carry it around.
Yes.
And like the amount of like ammunition he shoots out of it would weigh like almost like 1,000 pounds. So like, what do you do? Where's your sled full of ammo for this stupid gun? But yeah, like I love the whole thing. You know, the whole thing is appealing to me.
Right.
Yeah.
Did you see Commando as well?
Of course.
All right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't want to. Okay. My experience with Predator is I'm probably sculpted by my rejection of those movies and everything in them from my childhood. You know what I mean? Like my identity is about I'm not into this stuff. And it was kind of interesting watching Predator as an adult and going like, this is super fun. But my issue with Arnold Schwarzenegger in this film and all films.
Be careful, bro.
I know. No, I'll tread lightly because you have thick skin about everything except Arnold Schwarzenegger for some reason.
Yeah.
Is I don't understand why I know who he is. I feel like do you remember that?
I'm sorry. I'm just flabbergasted by it. You don't understand why you don't know Earth's greatest champion?
I don't know why. I don't know why I know who he is. Like, the only way I can think of it is like, okay, do you remember the Paula Abdul video for Opposites Attract? It was obviously, with this animated cat just like slap. Or I thought it was a dog. It's been so long. Okay, it's like slapped on, right? And it looks terrible, sort of like Roger Rabbit. Mm-hmm. That's how I feel Arnold Schwarzenegger is in every movie. There's like this movie, and then there's this cartoon ridiculousness that very charismatic, very interestingly and compellingly rendered. But it sort of has nothing to do with the rest of what's going on. And that might be less true in Predator because this is such a goofy, overboard, cartoonish movie.
Yeah.
But his entire cinematic career, which is pretty legion, actually, is him just sort of blustering senselessly across these movies where he can barely speak English, he can't act, he's absurdly big. It's always very nonsensical, and it's always a square peg into a Hollywood movie in a way that almost nobody else in the history of, or very few people in the history of Hollywood are like. Mm-hmm. There are very few people we can point to in movies on the scale of Schwarzenegger movies that are so completely absurd. And there are other action heroes as big, but like Tom Cruise doesn't walk into a Mission Impossible movie and undermine the scene with how absurd he is. He fits seamlessly into his scenes. Arnold Schwarzenegger is impossible in all of his scenes.
If he was not famous and you saw him, you would not be able to not look at him.
Right.
You know, like he's such a weird thing in the world. I mean, especially, have you ever seen Pumping Iron?
I did not. I've seen little clips of it, and I know how crazy he is.
I mean, he's a psychopath, but in like a really, I mean, when you think about all these weird world religions that are like, oh, the Ubermensch is coming, or like be your best self or whatever, this dude like basically achieved it. You know, he was like, dude drove a tank in Austria, came to America and married a Kennedy, and he could for sure be president if they didn't have the foreign-born law rule, like for sure. Right. You know, so I get what you're saying, like his presence is just so weird, but to me, this movie is so over the top, it was almost like crafted around him, which it basically was. You know, they were pretty much like, hey, we have Arnold in this role, And rather than him being like the Terminator, where he's like a presence that is imposing, he's just one of a group of people. So everybody else had to be huge too,
which they mostly are.
Yeah, except for Shane Black,
Yeah.
who plays the guy with the glasses.
Yep.
If you've seen Predator, and he actually wrote the new Predator.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is super weird. He wrote Lethal Weapon too. I mean, there's just like champions of the '80s in this movie. You know.
Yeah. I want to change subjects and complain about something else that'll lead into something that you can sort of uphold for us. Before we started recording, we were talking about clunky, unrealistic action, and something that I've become more aware of both by watching horror films with more seriousness and then studying Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and thinking about how violence is actually enacted in real time, and then watching especially movies that are like 90s, pre-90s, that violence is depicted so unrealistically before recently. I mean, it's still, violence is always glorified and slick and interesting choreography. But I find when I watch a movie from especially the 80s, or the 70s is even worse, there's a fight and there's a lot of standing around and there's a lot of like waiting to get hit or waiting for the explosion and not ducking.
Yeah.
And it's just like terrible choreography.
Like two dudes circling each other, like in all the Westerns.
Yes.
It's just absurd.
I think I've said this on 2 other episodes of Scary Thoughts, just like, here comes the roundhouse, don't duck, still coming, don't duck, pow, Yeah, and this movie is kind of all of that, like almost every scene of explosions, and there's a lot of dead time and people not reacting the way a human would react to an explosion or to an attack. But that kind of makes it more fun because it's just so stilted and awkward.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of interesting you watching it now because, like, having never seen it from this year, it has to read as campy.
I'm going to get into that later.
Like,
for
it
sure.
could basically
It's
be.
hella camp.
I mean, it could basically be Tropic Thunder in a lot of ways. Like you could twist the script a little bit.
Well, I was thinking Starship Troopers even.
Yeah, although Starship Troopers is like so inherently ironic in the way.
Isn't this movie? You could read. So I don't know. I don't know how purposeful it is. It's hard to know, but. This is a movie that comes on with that fucking handshake that is so beautiful that turns into an air arm wrestle.
Yeah, it's a great meme. It's always funny.
Glorious.
Yeah.
And it's just these like posturing, overbearing, macho testosterone fountains that just get decimated.
It's
like
beyond
helplessly.
testosterone too. I mean, these dudes are like shooting like horse steroids and shit.
Yes. But then they just get leveled like they're nothing. Like they are just zero challenge to this predator. And it's kind of like Starship Troopers. It feels just maybe slightly self-aware and ironic. I don't know. And this is something I have big questions about because I'm not invested in this level of machismo and never have been. But like action movies always seem kind of campy to me. Are they all actually campy, or do I just not get it and I'm just trying to throw some extra read on it?
I mean, to me, they are always hilarious in the way that I'm never really scared by horror movies. I'm always like kind of like laughing maniacally in my head, like when I'm seeing crazy violence in horror movies. It's the same thing for this. And to me, like we were talking before we got on mic about how this is basically wrestling's legacy. And this whole over-the-top, super huge, crazy bodybuilder thing. I mean, 10 to 15 years before, it was an underground New York sex thing. Like, bodybuilders basically made their money by, like, turning tricks in, like, gay places. And then all of a sudden, the first real big star is Arnold Schwarzennegger, and he completely changes the aesthetic of action movie manhood. Like, I mean, he's solely responsible for it. And there's a few other people that kind of came around. That
Lou Ferrigno, maybe?
Yeah, he was all, I mean, as per the movie Pumping Iron, always in Arnold's shadow.
Okay.
And never really, I mean, just look at his career. Like, he never really had the same heights. And, and one of the cool things about Schwarzenegger was he would always try to bring his buddies along with him. Like, that was kind of the deal because he always wanted to be, like, surrounded by other cool, huge, giant dudes because he was the biggest of the giants or whatever. There's even a funny story from the shooting of this where the costuming woman told Jesse the Body Ventura that his arms were actually bigger than Arnold's. and Jesse was like, fuck yeah, and was basically like went over and thinking he had some sort of inside information, bet Arnold that his arms were bigger. And so they bet something, I don't know, like a box of cigars or some shit like that. And they went to go measure, and Arnold's arms were quite a bit larger, and he had told the prop woman to tell Jesse the Body Ventura that so that he would embarrass himself in front of everybody. And he did shit like that all the time. I mean, the dude is like a master troll. In Pumping Iron, there's even another story that's great where he's up against some other dude at like kind of like a mid-level bodybuilding competition. And he told the guy, he's like, this is your edge. Go out there and just scream. Just go, ah, and just scream. He's like, there's nobody can beat that. And so this guy got it all in his head and went out there and did it. And like, basically they gave him like a 0 because it was so insane. And then Arnold won. Like he was constantly fucking with people like that. Apparently the set was no different. And I think you can read a lot of the merriment on the screen. Like it seems like probably everybody was having a good time because they're all fucking roided up and they're working out at like 4 a.m., shooting for 12 hours and then working out again after shooting like all day. So it was just like full on roid rage and cigars. Like this whole movie is just fueled by chaos.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I'm also curious about I guess I would call it a trope in military films and these hypermasculinist action films where homosocial bonding as exposition. So rather than you set the scene and you explain things and here's what's going to happen. You just have a bunch of men insult each other and you get a sense of what the plot is somehow by men just sort of like flexing muscles at each other.
Yeah, totally. It's such an ensemble war cast thing. Like they make fun of each other and then, this guy's from Brooklyn and this guy's like a cowboy and this other dude is like a Native American. Like you get this like almost Village People kind of deal.
Speaking of camp,
yeah, yes. I mean it's this group is just as campy as it gets. I'll also say that I think people who love these movies might have a lower incident of racism. This is a weird theory I have, which is like a lot of my friends in this. So this is crazy and probably not exactly backable. But I think about my friends in the South, and we all grew up watching these movies, and you don't get like, oh, these people are inferior or whatever, like a Klansman or something like that, because you're watching people on film be friends. It's almost like to me, I was thinking about how war and ensemble war movies were kind of like a melting pot, and you see it on screen really big. And even back in World War II, people would talk about how they had never seen another person from another race or whatever, and and the military was actually the great melting pot. It's almost like you need violence to move culture really far and really fast. Like that moved culture more than anything else. Like World War II moved women into the workforce faster than any suffrage movement ever did. It's just weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I could be wrong about all that, but I think it makes some sense.
I wish we had an intern that could go do this research for us and we could pick it up sometime.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do the research.
Me either. Get out there and start reading, folks.
Yeah. Nice theory. Thanks. I'm still a little hung up on this camp, like masculine performances camp. Because, I mean, it does even start with bodybuilding and wrestling. And defining camp is sort of really easy and kind of really difficult. Actually, my wife, Monique Jenkinson, taught a class on camp, and so much of it was about defining it.
Right.
And sometimes defining things takes the life out of them. Like, well, why do you have to define terms? But at the same time, that's sometimes really interesting. Like, how do we want to?
Yeah, got to earn those PhDs somehow. Let's create a ponderous definition and write a turgid book.
Oh my God. But I do think like, a bunch of men mugging for the camera with this absurdly symphonic sort of post-Wagnerian music, isn't that campy? Or if it's not, why is it not? What makes it not different from camp? At wrestling, when is it campy and when is it not?
I mean, like wrestling is, I've heard it described as the opera of the working class. And I think...
Is maybe working class not camp? Or, I don't know. I'm just throwing that out there.
I mean, I would say maybe that the people who are invested in defining camp might be looking down on the masses in a certain way. And it's like a certain thing, like by noticing that it is camp and identifying it as camp, it's like creating a distance from it, and you get to like sort of put it in its little box and minimize it a little bit. Whereas other people might just be like, this is fucking awesome, and not be aware. They might like be responding to exactly the same things in the exact same ways, but you haven't been trained to like put it through a camp lens.
Camp is definitely a lens, and it being a lens definitely means you're using a critical apparatus which infers a distance. But I don't know that it's necessarily looking down, because I don't think that opera queens who recognize the campiness of Italian opera are looking down on it. Although there's a sort of delight in its overwrought emotional content, you know? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean,
I don't know where to go with this.
People, probably a lot of people listening to this who are not wrestling fans or whatever, don't understand how big it is. It is fucking enormous. I mean, even to this day, I think it's now bigger than it's ever been. And in the 80s, it was as big as anything.
Well, I mean, yeah, funny, going back to what I was saying earlier about, like, I think my identity is partly defined by not liking Arnold Schwarzennegger movies when I was a kid, is I was thinking about wrestling in this movie because there's such overlap with aesthetics. I mean, obviously, Jesse Ventura's in it, but even besides that, just it feels like a wrestling, like a spin-off from a WWF conflict. But thinking about how big wrestling was in the 80s, I don't think I had any sort of consciousness around wrestling. Like, I think even the jocks in my high school, I don't think anybody in my high school cared about wrestling. Like, I think I was so removed from wrestling that even the jocks at my high school didn't even really care about wrestling either. It was just like so gone from my reality.
You definitely grow out of it too. I mean, I think that like, how old were you in 1987? I was 9, so you would have been like
16.
Yes, you would have been. Wrestling was something you kind of grew out of around 11 or 12.
Yeah,
it was definitely like.
I guess I missed it completely. I was also in Canada when I was a tween. So
yeah, who knows what they have going on up there? There's not enough freedom, so probably not good wrestling.
Well, I mean, you know what? Hockey.
Yeah, you guys
Especially
got hockey.
Back then, fucking the violence in hockey was crazy.
Yeah,
you didn't have to wear helmets.
Yeah.
Penalties for fighting were like incidental.
Yeah, one of the highlights of the Joe Rogan episode with
Yes,
Rob Zombie is
I'm
talking
glad
about the hockey. And he mentioned the
Philadelphia
Flyers and how fucking violent they were. And he talked about, he's like, man, you got to go see the game where they played against the Russians. And so I went on YouTube and watched it. And dude, they smashed them.
So the Philadelphia Flyers played a Russian team.
They played
in
like the Russian
late
national
70s?
team. Yeah, it was like maybe early 80s, maybe in the 80s or whatever. It was like a pre-Olympic exhibition game.
And just for context, the Philadelphia Flyers are what the movie Slapshot was based on.
Yeah.
So just this completely unhinged group of hockey players.
Yeah.
Like who were hired kind of for their skills at playing hockey, but mostly for their ability to wreak violence on the other team.
If you know hockey at all, like there's an unofficial position called enforcer. And you're basically like, your job is to just go fuck up the other team star players and just violently assault them. And so the Flyers built they were like, we're just going to have all enforcers pretty much. And that's how they rolled. And, you know, they became dominant. They won the Stanley Cup like a couple years in a row. You know, that works. I don't understand why I had never even heard of that Russian thing. Because if you want to see communists getting fucking smashed, that is the video for you, man. It is great.
Oh my God. Okay. I have to see that. We'll have to link that in our newsletter.
Yeah.
It's funny. I was living in Montreal in the like late 70s, early 80s. And the big, Rob Zombie and Joe Rogan were talking about Bobby Orr. And in Canada, it was Guy Lafleur, who was this beautiful captain of the Montreal Canadiens. And he had like long flowing hair, and this was pre-helmets. And it was also interesting, they made a helmet rule in the NHL, but it only applied to newer players. So the older players didn't have to start wearing helmets. So there was this time where everybody had a helmet except for Guy Lafleur, who would skate down the ice with his hair flowing.
It's so awesome.
And people wouldn't fight him. It was like he was just too charismatic to punch or to be punched. He was just above it all.
Yeah.
Anyway, whatever.
I don't know. I feel like I might start watching hockey now because we got the San Jose Sharks right there. I've been to a couple Sharks games. It's kind of fun. I don't know the rules, so it's kind of hard to follow.
I mean, it's basketball or soccer. It's just put the thing in the thing. That's
I mean, I've been to 2 games though, and I didn't see a single fight, and I was so bummed out.
Well, it's different now. I mean, you can't. The punishment for fighting is severe now. They continue to up the penalties.
Such a disappointment.
Yeah. Well, that's the world we live in. It's fine with me. It's not as fun, but
People got to get it out some way, man. It's just going to pop up somewhere else.
yeah.
Like comments on Twitter or whatever. Like the people got to get their bad shit out.
It's true.
Yeah. My relationship with this whole like hyper masculinity, like commando thing was kind of interesting because like I loved it. Like, man, I wanted to be like a special forces assassin of some sort, but basically like my body betrayed me when I was a little kid. I was very sick. I had severe asthma. I basically became mostly blind. My my eyesight was so terrible that there was none of that. So it completely took me out of the running. I mean, not that I was ever in the running, but like it's probably a direction I would have gone if I was, didn't have asthma. And so instead I just got into like weird science fiction action stuff that kind of drove me down this road of like alternative stuff, and this movie for sure is one of those like turning point movies for me.
Yeah. That's
It was kind of like a bridge. It's like when you get into these, there's something so original about this movie. Even though it's like basically every single trope from any action movie ever is put into this movie, the creature to me is so original that it elevates this movie above other stuff.
Something it does interestingly, and I think this is partly the reason that you might have brought it to this podcast, this horror podcast, is that it is sort of a slasher movie.
Yeah, it's definitely a slasher movie.
It follows a lot of the conventions of an 80s slasher movie. And we can think of Arnold Schwarzennegger as a final girl. He doesn't work exactly as a final girl because a final girl is, at least in almost every instance I can think of, an innocent. Just a sort of like an average person, an average woman who watches her comrades drop dead, whereas Arnold is a soldier going in to do violence of not against the predator, but of some sort. So he's already sort of complicit in some sort of conflict, and that's how that's different.
Well, other ways it's like a horror movie. The one at a time, killed off.
Yep.
And this movie, talk about fucking villainous trifling. Like the predator is constantly fucking with them and waiting for, the right moment or the mood to strike or something,
Yep.
And, the comic books kind of retcon this whole society where the harder the kill, the more the honor they have.
Actually, could you back up a second and maybe explain in a long form way for people like me who have only seen Predator, what happens, not the plot, but that there is this kind of huge extended universe. Maybe explain how that works.
Yeah. So as far as I understand, so you have Predator in 1987 and then Predator 2 in 1990. And Predator 2 obviously expands the universe a little bit and shows more things. And what it really shows is the collection of the trophies. And one of the things that you can see, and if you're really paying attention, there is a xenomorph from Alien Skull in the Predator's thing, and so you're like, whoa, what is that? And apparently it was just a cool prop that somebody threw in. That's all I've ever heard. There was never any intention to blend the universes. And then Dark Horse Comics, and this is, I don't know exactly where it starts, but anyway, Dark Horse starts putting out these like crossover stories, Alien versus Predator. And the idea is that the Predators, who in the comics are called the Yautja, Yautja, which is weird. They are a complete warrior caste intergalactic society. And their whole thing is basically whoever can kill the most shit in the hardest way is the most badass, which is why they have like hand-to-hand weapons and stuff like that. And why they'll drop in and like kill you with a knife instead of using their crazy parrot gun on their shoulder. And so one of the things they do is they capture xenomorph queens and then use them to like seed the most dangerous game on planet. So in one of the movies, they have like a pyramid, like a Mayan pyramid, and they're basically using like human sacrifices to impregnate them with the xenomorphs, and then they pop out and then they go hunt them around. And so there's a really highly developed like caste system based on like how many xenomorph queens you kill and whether or not you can destroy an entire hive of xenomorphs by yourself. It's just interesting. And then you also have the engineers that you see in like Prometheus. They're sort of a race in conflict with the Yautja at different comic book points. I don't want to, it's too much to describe that here. But basically, the xenomorphs are spread around the universe by the predators, like going out and hunting with them. And every once in a while, they'll just fuck up and get killed. And then the whole planet gets taken over by the xenomorphs, which is how, Ripley's ship, when she goes into Alien, like may or may not have been the result of the predators trying to like seed this planet with these things they hunt. Anyway, so that's the kind of short of it. Is they're basically using the xenomorphs as like a canned hunt to prove their power in their society.
Well, it's funny because I was talking to you before we started recording about how open-ended and clunky the way everything rolls out in this movie is. And something you pointed out is the way in which Predator 2 and After sort of does a constant retconning of the first movie. Like it explains the behavior and explains the clunkiness. And it almost makes me think that all of the follow-ups are just excuses to explain away the previous iterations, as opposed to an expanding universe. It's actually a series of apologies or something.
Right.
It's just excuse making as a franchise.
Yeah, and the other thing that's kind of fun about the whole series is that as a Predator 2, there are human agencies that recognize this extraterrestrial threat and then try to. Their whole deal is they want to capture it. Awesome. Gary Busey in Predator 2, phenomenal. So he plays like the head of some sort of like secret government agency that's trying to capture the predators so that they can use their equipment or something like that. It's just super goofy. And that's kind of carried over into the 2019 Predator, which is 100% trash all the way through. It is a garbage movie. But that's the bummer, is like there's more shitty Predator stuff than there is good Predator stuff, which is kind of a bummer. Same thing with the Alien movies, I'd say.
It's like Phantasm.
Yeah, Phantasm mostly bad, but you do get Phantasm too.
Oh, another thing that Predator makes me think of slasher movies, you sort of end up identifying more with the killer than with the final girl and the other characters that are dispatched. The Predator, you don't get that much from him, but he is kind of Freddy Krueger-ish. There's something really compelling and interesting about him.
I think one of the things that makes you really, I don't want to say you identify with him at all, because I didn't, but you definitely think it's a cool character, and there's that. But I think the scene where he's injured and he repairs himself and like does like like first aid on himself, there's something about that makes the character seem not immortal, like in a Michael Myers way. And you're like, oh fuck, it's unstoppable. You're like, oh, they might be able to stop this guy. So there's a tension between whether or not the Predator can pull it off or not, like killing all these mercenaries.
Yeah.
So, and that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
It's also like it's a Vietnam movie. Like all their equipment is from the previous war pretty much. And there was definitely around the early mid 80s, there was a lot of people who had either been in the war, like Oliver Stone, or people who didn't but glorified it, like John Milius, who wrote Apocalypse Now. And a lot of the look of the mercenaries is just straight out of Vietnam.
That makes sense. I mean, it definitely feels like First Blood. Not First Blood, excuse me, Rambo. The cinematography, the jungle cinematography is actually really solid.
Yeah.
It's kind of a beautiful movie.
Yeah.
All the shots are really well composed. And it's interestingly, a lot of it is quite slow. A lot of it's just like these meditative shots of jungle and people staring in tension and fear.
Yeah, I think the movie is paced really well. And another thing other than the cinematography that's cool about it is there are a lot of really small moments in it that just add up to an interesting film, like the sticking a knife on the guy's shoulder to kill the scorpion. It's just a weird little moment, or like the the boombox in the helicopter when they were like going in, and it's playing like weird 50s music, and just the bantering back and forth about the chewing tobacco. And it's like, if you guys have
The
been
pussy jokes.
Yeah.
They're so awkward.
Yeah, they're so weird. Shane Black wrote all of them.
God damn it.
Yeah, so here's a super, super weird one. Okay, so there's the one pussy joke where he's like, it's like an echo.
Yeah.
He's like, so.
And Billy starts laughing way late.
Yeah, way late. But the thing that's so weird about that is I think that joke is based on, now this is a super deep cut that I've never heard anyone else say, but it's based on the trailer for the porno movie Behind the Green Door.
Oh, I haven't seen it.
So I haven't seen it either, but it was on, it was one of the previews that was before this Debbie Does Dallas VHS tape I had when I was like a teenager.
Yeah.
And there's a scene where the guy's like talking to this woman, and he's like kind of going down on her, and he goes, "It's so big," and then it echoes, and it goes, "It's so big," and she's like, "Well, you didn't have to say it twice." He's like, "Say what twice?" And like that joke is for sure where that came from.
Sure.
I mean, right? But like, I've never heard anybody mention it, and you'd have to have like weirdly like been of a. I don't know, man. I don't know anybody else who's seen that trailer and seen Predator. Like, there must be somebody,
Sure.
I don't know. Inside information from pornography of the 70s.
What else does it do like a horror movie?
Let's see. What does it do like a horror movie? Well, the kills are great.
True.
Like, I mean, dude gets his arm blown off, head blown off, people get shot in the chest, chopped, skinned, spines ripped out.
It's pretty graphic when it's graphic.
Yeah.
Something I really do appreciate about it is that it explains almost nothing.
Yes.
Which is so hard for the average Hollywood movie with real money invested in it to do. It seems that subtlety, that this movie is so lacking in subtlety, but actually I think one of its strengths is that it has a lot of subtlety in that the predator, who the fuck is he? What is he doing? You get a little bit of a sense, and like you were saying, he's repairing himself. It's not explained.
Yeah, the bomb when it goes off, it's just like the artifacts of the character are so good and they make so much sense. And now you would almost imagine like, oh my God, he's setting a bomb, everybody run, because the audience is so dumb.
Yeah.
Like, you're just like, okay.
There is one moment though, I think Arnold Schwarzenegger realizes something and he says, oh fuck.
There's a scene where he's like, it's haunting us. Or like, it's
Something
like out
like
of
that,
nowhere.
yeah.
He notices it. Predator 2 has an even more egregious scene where the lead looks into the window of a taxidermy shop, and it's like all these hunting trophies, and all of a sudden he realizes what's happening. And you're like, oh, okay, I guess. And Danny Glover is like so much more insane than Arnold is in Predator 2.
Oh, yeah.
Like, he's just basically a muttering to himself bad cop with like a trunk full of high-powered pistols for no reason, and it takes place in this kind of like apocalyptic 1997 in LA. Between Cuban and Jamaican gangs. It's so unhinged.
Where does this movie take place?
Where? Oh, it takes place in South America.
Is that where it's shot, or is that where it takes place?
It both takes place in South America because she's speaking Spanish, the girl that they pick up.
Yeah.
And if you have the subtitles on, there's a moment when they're shooting out, everybody says speaking English, speaking Russian, speaking Spanish, and it's just like, whoa, what's going on? And I don't know what the deal is, but it is unclear where they land. But my memory of it was that it was in Vietnam. That it was there.
Total, of course.
But it was kind of, if you think about it historically, it was a time of like Sandinista, like post-Sandinista rebels in South America, and the incursion of like Russians into South America and all this shit. So it's like barely a Cold War movie, but it is a Cold War movie.
Right. And are we to understand that these soldiers were sent in by people who knew the predator was there, and this outpost of whatever, Sandinistas, whatever the fuck they are, was merely a pretext or an incidental accident? Does that make sense? Like in Aliens, they are sent in ignorant of what the actual mission is. Are these soldiers sent in ignorant that it is a trap for them to get in a conflict with the predator?
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, if you were only looking at this movie, the CIA guy definitely knows that they have sent a previous troop in that haven't made it out. Like, so they definitely know that that's happened because they find the
Do
bodies.
they know more than that?
Well,
Like maybe why, or
yeah, it's unclear.
is that inferred at all, or that's what I'm getting at.
I don't. I mean,
Does it lead, again? I'm talking about like, oh, there's a lot of subtlety. Is that a subtlety? Like, oh, maybe someone knew in advance, or is it like, no, there's shady shit going on, but this is news to everybody.
yeah, I would say in this particular movie by itself, there's just shady shit going on.
Got it.
But at the same time, the predators have been coming to Earth for hundreds of years at this point, like in the broader mythology. So it's entirely possible, some NASA spots one of the ships coming in or whatever. It has that opening like spaceship coming down shot, which is like kind of similar to The Thing.
Yeah.
It's just, it definitely lets you know it's like a sci-fi movie, like right out the gate with that, which is pretty funny.
My friend Jesse, I told him we were doing this episode, and he had this observation that John McTiernan, the guy who directed this and directed Die Hard, which is, best action movie ever, maybe best movie ever. Is that possible?
Great, yeah.
Solid. Part of his observation was that Die Hard is a movie that takes place in the closed space of an office tower where the hero dispatches all of the enemies, whereas Predator is in the open space of a jungle where the enemy dispatches all of the heroes. So Die Hard and Predator are these inversions of each other.
I'll accept it.
It's great. It may literally be like, how do I go beat for beat, make all of the elements of one movie be the opposite in the other. Something I really don't like about this movie that I think is a real failing is the music.
Oh, I was literally just looking at my note that said the trumpet solo when the dude dies is so fucking lame. I can't believe it.
Oh, military snares.
Yes.
Like orchestra plus snares. Fuck off. It's so obvious and so trite.
There is like
it's just such a pompous, like I hate John Williams to begin with. But,
you're so wrong about this.
But like subpar John Williams just is nails on a chalkboard to me.
Yeah, it's definitely not, like for example, like the Terminator soundtrack is so iconic and cool all the way through and feels good in the movie. This is just like, it's almost like somebody involved, like a producer was like, this is an action movie, a war movie. We need action war sound. And it would probably, if it had some sort of cool, anachronistic, like electronic soundtrack, it would have been cooler.
Sure.
Yeah. And way more interesting.
And someone would be reissuing it on some very boutique label on vinyl right now.
Yeah. We'd have to go suffer through seeing the band play it at the DNA Lounge like 30 years later. See all of our friends posting about it on Instagram.
Oh, for sure.
Speaking of, I think Goblin played last night.
2 nights ago, yeah.
Yeah.
I still want to do an episode about Goblin. Just their music.
Yeah. That would be an interesting episode.
Yeah. What else?
This movie has a few things from the 80s that are phenomenal. The montaging is excellent. Like there's 2 booby trap montages.
Yeah.
Which is phenomenal.
Which actually made me think of this movie has more in common with Home Alone than any 80s slasher movie. Just making booby traps for the bad guy.
Yeah. Which is sort of kind of like what Phantasm is. It's not booby trappy. I don't know. Maybe I'm mixing it up with something else. There's definitely in horror movies, like usually the second or third of the series, like
someone sets a trap.
Like in Nightmare on Elm Street 3, they kind of figure out how to manipulate the dreams and they, whatever nonsense they do. I mean, there's like a full on like waterfall escape in this movie, where like Arnold like goes floating down the river. It's so, there's so much like really big, dumb stuff in this movie. I mean, at one point, like there's a boxing match. Like Arnold fights the Predator hand to hand. I mean, it's so nonsense.
Yeah. And those moments and that element of this movie, and I assume future movies, it's got that kind of Klingon samurai honor, warrior honor thing. Yeah. That it doesn't really click with me just because of who I am, but I also, because I'm not on board with that sort of mentality, when I see it in movies, I don't okay, you're a predator and you have this sort of like honor, pride in violence. So when they've got a gun, I'll whip out a bigger gun, but that's no contest because my gun is bigger. And when it's hand-to-hand combat, I'm bigger and stronger, so I'm going to win anyway. So like, it's not actually fair, and it's not actually a competition. It's not actually honorable because you're always bigger and stronger. It kind of doesn't matter whether you go fist to fist or gun to gun. You've always got the bigger weapons. So what's the contest?
Yeah, the other thing too, these dudes are like used to fighting alien queens, you know. Although, you know, like some people, if you look at like some of the, you know, like people discussing the films online, like there's some conversation that like the predator from the first series is actually like maybe a young and inexperienced predator, and the people he's hunting like at his level, like he's a pretty low level predator, and that's supposed to be kind of the scary thing. And you see that in Predator 2. Danny Glover manages, I mean, spoiler alert, manages to off the one that's hunting him, and then he's on the ship at the very end, and like 8 of them come out of the shadows, and one of them, who looks to be a very like venerable one, throws him like a flintlock pistol, like kind of like, good job, buddy, and then they take off, and then he kind of has his,
What?
Yeah, that's how. Did you not see Predator 2?
No.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good.
Oh, maybe I will.
And then the very end, like Danny Glover, like their spaceship takes off and it kind of trashes wherever he's hanging out, and he's covered in ash and he's like moving really slow, and it has like a Butoh dancer kind of feel to it.
Jesus.
Yeah.
All right. That's a little compelling. Anything else?
Oh, the way it ends with every character smiling
You
is
mean
so
it's sort of like these are the people you just watched die with their name next to them?
Yeah, it's so
That
weird.
was a thing in movies.
Yeah, it was a thing, but it wasn't like a huge thing.
It was occasional.
Yeah, it was occasional, like, and it's like bloopery because they're like turn real serious and they smile.
Yeah.
But the only one that doesn't smile is Arnold, because smiling's for bitches, I guess. Yeah, I like, all in all, like, do you think you would be curious to watch the rest of them? Because this is a huge franchise,
no
especially
doubt.
if you can, and also if you consider like the Alien films as part of this franchise or vice versa. I mean, there's like 12 films altogether. That's like Marvel movie level.
True. I think I would watch the second one. I don't know, maybe. I feel like the last 2 Alien movies were just fucking abysmal. They're just garbage movies.
Prometheus, are you talking about those two?
Yeah, and I don't know.
Prometheus 2, Electric Boogaloo.
Yeah, just
Whatever
Aliens
it is.
Millennium, or who fucking knows
Yeah,
what it's
who
called.
knows?
I just thought they were so fucking bad. I just get really easily discouraged if I think something goes off the rails and gets stupid, that I just kind of have a hard time getting invested, despite the fact that I'm watching the Saw movies right now. Actually, I want to put this out there. We'll get back to this. But
These movies.
hang on. How many people would have to write in and go like, yeah, do the Saw movies, not Saw, but the franchise, for us
We
to
would have
cover
to
the
watch
franchise?
all of them?
Yeah, like, because I know
50 people.
50 people would have
Yeah.
for you to actually sit through all of them.
Yeah, to sit
Okay,
through all
because
of
I'm going to
them.
sit through all of them anyway.
I mean, I watched and enjoyed the first one.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, I mean, and I don't dislike them for like hipster reasons, like, oh, it's not horror or whatever. I just don't care for
Right.
whatever. I just was like, and I think part of it is like the mythos of it isn't compelling. Like, I like a sci-fi or supernatural element or something like that. And the whole idea of like,
Cranky cancer patient.
yeah, just, I don't know what it just wasn't. Although, yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
I think interesting discussions can come out of it, though.
What is the theme? Because you've obviously watched the first one too, right?
Yeah.
Okay. What is the theme that you would want to pick out of it to discuss?
The central theme of the series, at least the first ones, I don't know where it goes, but is all about this right to life in a different sense of how we normally use that expression. The meaningfulness in one's life and who gets to judge the value of human life, who has the right to decide someone else's value, and do you have a right to hold up a mirror to someone else's life and impose your will against them about what you decide they are seeing or not seeing about themselves. I mean, it's rolled out in a fairly
Saw-
flabby way, but
so
that's
Saw as the progressive left. Is that?
or the alt right. I don't
guess
sure.
so. Yeah, I mean, I guess so. Like, Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they're cool looking movies.
I mean, no matter what happens, it's going to descend into an argument around identity politics because everything does. But
yeah. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that movie. I'd have to rewatch it.
I mean, I don't know if any of them are worth rewatching, but I think they're worth watching.
So I think,
Interestingly, it's sort of central to the whole conversation around torture porn. Like it was part of that moment, but it's sort of not torture porn, actually. It's pretty violent, and it's about captive people being subjected to violence, but it's not like Audition or Hostel or any of the movies that are genuinely about torture.
I guess like my criticism of it is that it feels like a very cheap mechanism to set up like kills that they thought were interesting.
Oh, sure, but I mean that's like it's like the Final Destination movies,
And I don't find those movies compelling. At all.
Fucking!
Yeah.
I wish it was a TV series. I would be obsessed with it.
I think the reason why
Have you seen Escape Room?
the movie,
Yeah. Well,
No.
there are like 10 movies called Escape Room, but the one that just came out not too long
haven't
ago.
seen it, no.
It's super fun, and it's also like I hope this is a series because I would totally suck it up. I just want to see more escape rooms.
you know that online newspaper, the Hard Times? It's like the Onion for hardcore.
Yeah.
They had an article today. It's an escape room for getting out of your friend's band's show.
My
So
stomach just sank.
I just walk out. I don't fuck around. I Irish goodbye that shit every time. Speaking of escape rooms, we should mention the Peaches Christ
Yes.
Into the Dark zombie apocalypse escape room is pretty fucking. The escape room is new, but last year the haunted house was pretty great.
Yeah, so those of you in the San Francisco Bay Area, or if you might be visiting the San Francisco Bay Area for Halloween, which you should anyway, it's a good place to be for Halloween. Peaches Christ is doing, again, a haunted house walkthrough and an escape room at the San Francisco Mint, which is a really cool space. And Chad and I went last year and had a pretty fucking rad time.
Yeah.
It's very dragon-flected and very fucking weird.
Yeah, it's great. And a lot of the murals and art pieces inside of it this year are done by Skinner.
Oh, really?
Yeah, who's one of my favorite artists. I just love
That's cool.
his art so much.
But getting back to your question about would I watch the rest of the series, I feel like just based on how much did I like this movie and what comes after it, if it was all on Netflix and I didn't have to pay for each episode, I would totally like late night, I'm bored, get through it.
Yeah.
I mean, I have discovered a lot of my favorite movies that way.
I can't, like, as much as I love Predator and the whole universe of it, I can't recommend the films at all beyond the second one.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I've been so disappointed in each one
Yeah.
that I'm just done with it.
That's too bad.
Yeah. And I thought the new one could have been fun because, like, oh, Shane Black is writing it. You know, he's kind of got like an aesthetic that I like. Nope.
So what have we learned?
We've learned that I have no idea. Don't go in the jungle with your friends ever. Definitely do bicep curls. If you have a machine gun, it needs to have a rocket launcher.
Is this performance of masculinity, this affect, useful or positive? Or I'm not trying to moralize. I don't give a fuck. I'm just saying, like, is this actually like beneficial in any way to look at this form of masculinity?
Well, I was thinking about this exact question, actually, and I was thinking about it not so much in the violence context, but in kind of the body image context. Like the documentary Bigger, Faster, Stronger, which is about steroids, has this kind of like through line where the two brothers that are in it, they're completely inspired by these movies of this era, and they wanted to be as big and huge as they possibly could. They wanted to lift weights and look great, and so they got, their bodies don't work, doing it. 'Cause it takes fucking science to get like this, And, you always hear about like women talking about like, oh, Hollywood and its body image, it's fucking women up. I think these movies probably fucked a lot of dudes up too, as far as body image. You're like, man, my biceps aren't huge. I've been doing pull-ups all week. And, I can't arm wrestle Carl Weathers in the air. Like, so I think that, but they're just like military values, like don't leave a man behind,
Which is good.
Yeah, like
but
that stuff's.
But yeah, just the sort of like aggressive masculinity, the way we interact is we just push each other back and forth and try to dominate each other before we go and dominate someone else collectively. Like, is this a good model for citizenship?
I mean, it feels like that's how humans have rocked it forever, you know?
Does it continue to be? I mean, offline, you and I were talking about testosterone, and I made a quip about how, I wish my testosterone was lower, but I feel like, is this a charmingly outdated and useless way to... I'm asking it as if I already have an opinion about it, but sometimes I think about this as like, yeah, this is old school bullshit. Like, we just don't need this form of masculinity anymore. We can obviously learn some lessons from people who have taken something like patriarchy really, really far, or masculinity or physical strength really, really far. Like, we can take certain lessons from people who've exaggerated some life direction. But is this kind of masculinity actually like for any good other than to combat other people who are that way too?
Yeah.
That aren't us.
I mean, I feel like you could almost parse out masculinity and heroism, because how many times have you seen like the gender swapped version of this movie now? Like, even fucking Alien abandons what's cool about Ripley is that she's a scientist that manages to kill this creature on a haunted ship, basically. And by the fourth Alien film, she's like an ass-kicking, like Linda Blair type of character. You know,
Linda Hamilton?
Linda Hamilton, yeah, sorry. So it doesn't seem like Hollywood doesn't seem super invested in keeping this way of dealing with shit, which is like biceps and machine guns, to men.
Sure.
Yeah. So I don't know. I mean,
fair.
Yeah.
That's also just Hollywood.
Yeah, it's just high. I mean,
it's always a weird example of anything.
I mean, you think about like all the Marvel movies are basically WrestleMania.
Yeah.
You know, they all end in like some, you know, battle.
It's usually fist fight.
Yeah. It's just super silly. But yeah, I mean, if I could look like Arnold, I would snap my finger and do it. I would be like,
really?
Yeah, dude, it would be so hilarious to go through life like that.
So like, just as a lark?
Yeah. It would just be hilarious. I mean, it's got to be like one of the most fun body types to go through the world with, you know? Like, you see all these pictures from the 70s and 80s of Arnold. It's pretty much every single one of them is of him picking up a girl and putting him on his shoulder and flexing his biceps simultaneously. Like, if that's what you did all day, you would be having so much fun. I think so, anyway.
Wow.
Yeah. You can stab someone and say, stick
disagree.
around. I mean, like, it's like everything the dude does is hilarious to me.
Wow.
Yeah.
I honestly am the opposite.
Yeah.
I wish I could be smaller.
So crazy. But like, why? Like, there's no utility in being smaller unless you want to fit in stuff. Like
I'd want to fit in
drains
stuff
and things like that.
No, fit in better clothes and chairs and airline seats and
Yeah, but
it'd be easier to navigate the world.
Yeah, but you're not flying coach if you're Arnold. You know what I'm saying?
But if I'm Arnold, I'm flying in coach.
Yeah, I don't know. I just think it would be like so hilarious to be like a gigantic bodybuilder dude walking around. I mean, it's just like you would make every situation weird. Just your
it's
presence.
funny. You're sort of describing a campy situation.
Yes, yes. Yeah, I'd have no disagreement on this being a full camp thing. To me, okay, being like a bodybuilder is not so far removed from being a drag queen in my mind.
Sure.
You know, it's just this performative extreme of ginger.
Yep.
Which is, it passes being cool to being hilarious. And like when it gets hilarious, that's what I think is worth. Like, for example, Kindergarten Cop. Hilarious. Arnold Schwarzenegger teaching kindergarten.
Is it?
Yeah.
I mean, it's a funny idea, but then...
Have you not seen Kindergarten Cop?
Of course not.
What?
How would I have seen that
So
movie?
when somebody says it's not a tumor, you don't have any sort of emotional reaction to it?
I mean, if I just heard someone say that and I was eavesdropping, I would go like, oh, someone's doing an Arnold Schwarzenegger impression, but I have no idea what.
Oh, you got to see Kindergarten Cop. What about Twins with Danny DeVito?
Absolutely not.
What?
No.
Oh my God.
No.
Yeah.
I reject.
That movie asks important questions about genetics.
It does. More than the fourth Alien movie?
Oh, yeah. Running Man? No?
Oh, God. You know what? Actually, Running Man I think that's the only Arnold Schwarzenegger movie other than the Terminator movies that doesn't make my blood boil.
Last Action Hero?
Never seen it.
What about Conan? Have you seen Conan?
I did.
Okay.
I don't know.
What
I
about-
haven't seen it since I was a kid.
Well, I mean, as a feminist, you must love Red Sonja.
I never saw it.
What? Oh my God. This is so disappointing.
It's a feminist. Thank you. Yeah, Total Recall. Actually, a Total Recall, especially, even though it's a cartoonish, outlandish sci-fi movie, it's just like, who painted that weird form onto this otherwise interesting sci-fi movie? Kind of thought the remake was better. And it's partly because Arnold Schwarzenegger was not in it.
I don't even know what to say about that.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Do we have any mail or anything?
No mail. Do you?
No.
Send us mail. Send
Yeah.
us mail that insists that we should cover the Saw franchise.
Yeah. I guess.
Anything else?
That's it.
All right. So join the mailing list at scarythoughts.org, and we will see you next time for Child's Play 2019. Thanks for listening.
Later.
Holy shit. Just gone.
Marc has Alzheimer's.
Holy shit. Mid-sentence, gone.
Yeah.